Forget heroic newsreels and stoic generals. World War II wasn't just tragedy and triumph. It was a 6-year masterclass in human stupidity on a global scale. Seriously, some decisions made back then make modern internet challenges look like Nobel Prize-winning ideas. Welcome to Video, where we expose the historical facepalms nobody talks about. Get ready for 33 reasons to ask, how did we even win? Let's dissect the dumbness. 1. Let's start with something truly organic. Britain's Special Operations Executive, the SOE. Basically James Bond's weird cousins who preferred gadgets made of literal crap. Developed explosives disguised as horse manure. The tactical brilliance? Nobody questions a random pile of dung near a checkpoint or along a supply route. Imagine the rigorous testing phase. Jenkins rate the authenticity of this explosive equine dropping on a scale of 1 to steaming fresh. The plan involved agents casually dropping these manure mines. Thankfully for everyone involved, especially the agents tasked with handling them, Operation Brown Surprise, a name I just invented but it fits, never saw mass deployment. Probably logistical issues, or maybe just the sheer, overwhelming ick factor finally dawned on high command. 2. Forget bombers. Japan had paper balloons. Yes, thousands of fugo balloons, crafted from mulberry paper and filled with hydrogen, were launched carrying incendiary and anti-personnel bombs. The genius plan relied entirely on the jet stream to carry these flimsy contraptions over 5,000 miles across the Pacific to set American forests ablaze and terrify the populace. It's like trying to win the war by playing the world's most dangerous game of atmospheric lottery. Most predictably, vanished into the ocean. A few reached North America, tragically causing fatalities in Oregon, but as a strategic weapon? It was an expensive, ineffective, paper-thin dream that mostly just fed the fishes and baffled meteorologists. 3. The British Secret Service, clearly operating on a different level of reality, seriously contemplated a plan to chemically feminize Adolf Hitler. The idea wasn't assassination, but alteration. Sneak estrogen into his food. They genuinely theorized that making the Führer biologically more female might curb his notorious aggression, perhaps make him more inclined towards diplomacy, or at the very least, give him a higher singing voice for those intense speeches. Putting aside the monumental challenge of tampering with the diet of the world's most paranoid dictator, the entire concept rested on a profoundly bizarre and scientifically dubious understanding of hormones and personality. Would a slightly more estrogen-fueled Hitler have just called it all off? 4. Not wanting to be outdone in the weaponizing bewildered animals category, the United States poured resources into Project X-Ray, the bat bomb. This wasn't a comic book gadget, it was a real military project. The plan: strap tiny, custom-made napalm bombs with timers onto millions of Mexican free-tailed bats. Chill the bats into hibernation, load them into special canisters, drop these canisters over Japanese cities at dawn. As the bats warmed up, they'd fly off to roost in the eaves of Japan's primarily wooden buildings, and then ignite, causing widespread chaos and fire. Testing proved the concept, by having the armed bats escape mid-trial and promptly burn the American test facility to the ground. A fiery, furry nope from Mother Nature herself. 5. Nazi Germany's Lebensborn program wasn't just morally repugnant, it was scientifically idiotic. Spearheaded by Heinrich Himmler, the SS set up special homes where women deemed racially pure were encouraged, or forced, to bear children with SS officers. They genuinely thought they could selectively breed a master race of perfect Aryans like they were creating a new line of show dogs. This completely ignored the overwhelming influence of environment, culture, education, and the sheer complexity of human genetics beyond superficial traits like blonde hair and blue eyes. It was a grotesque fantasy built on hate and pseudoscience, doomed to fail from its inception. 6. The Soviet Union's tragic attempt at canine warfare involved anti-tank dogs. Trained, often through starvation, to associate food with the area underneath tanks, these dogs were strapped with explosives designed to detonate upon contact with the tank's hull. A horrifying concept made infinitely worse by a catastrophic training blunder. They primarily used familiar Soviet tanks for training. In the terrifying chaos of a real battle, confronted by loud, unfamiliar German panzers, the dogs frequently defaulted to what they knew, running towards the scent and shape of friendly Soviet tanks, resulting in devastating self-inflicted losses. A desperate, brutal tactic undone by profoundly dumb execution. 7. Need to quickly tell a friendly plane from an enemy plane zooming towards you at 300 miles per hour? The US military's answer? Playing cards. Special decks were printed featuring the silhouettes of various Axis and Allied aircraft. While perhaps a marginally useful memorization tool during downtime, imagine trying to consult your deck during a frantic dogfight. Hold on, Luftwaffe Ace? Is that the Messerschmitt Bf 109 on the Queen of Hearts? Or the Focke-Wulf 190 on the Jack of Clubs? Let me just shuffle through. Seems slightly less effective than rigorous training and immediate visual recognition under extreme stress. 8. The Germans, sometimes masters of deception, built an incredibly elaborate decoy airfield in Holland out of wood. Wooden planes, wooden hangars, even wooden trucks, all designed to fool Allied reconnaissance and lure bombers away from real targets. British intelligence, however, wasn't fooled for a second. Their response wasn't to bomb it repeatedly, but to deliver the ultimate insult. They dispatched a single Mosquito bomber, which flew low over the pristine fake airfield and dropped one precisely aimed non-explosive wooden bomb, painted with the inscription, "Wood for Wood." The trolling level was legendary. 9. Exploding rats. Yes, another morbidly creative gem from Britain's SOE. The plan was deliciously devious. Obtain quantities of dead rats, carefully slit them open, stuff them with plastic explosives and a time fuse, sew them back up, and have agents discreetly place them in the coal piles near German factory or locomotive boilers. An unsuspecting German stoker shovels coal, along with the booby-trapped rodent, into the furnace, leading to a devastating boiler explosion. Unfortunately, the very first shipment of these explosive vermin was intercepted by the Germans. The result wasn't mass sabotage, but mass paranoia. Suddenly, every dead rat was suspect, leading to nationwide rat inspection campaigns that wasted enormous amounts of German time and manpower. 10. America's Project Pigeon wasn't a joke. It was a serious, funded military research program led by behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner. The goal? Create pigeon-guided missiles. Inside the missile's nose cone, a screen displayed the target. Pigeons, trained through operant conditioning, getting food rewards, would peck at the screen to keep the target centered, their pecks physically adjusting the missile's fins. Astonishingly, tests showed the pigeons could perform the task with remarkable accuracy. But eventually, the sheer weirdness and perceived unreliability of trusting a complex weapon system to a bird's pecking instincts led the military to cancel the project in favor of electronic guidance. Sanity pecked its way through eventually. 11. As the war progressed and vital metals became scarce, Nazi Germany made a pragmatic yet symbolic switch, minting coins from zinc. While saving copper and nickel, zinc proved a terrible choice for currency. It corrodes incredibly easily, especially with handling and moisture. These wartime coins quickly turned dull, pitted, gray, and sometimes literally crumbled in circulation. Imagine the economic confidence inspired when your small change is actively disintegrating in your pocket. It became a tangible, everyday reminder of the Reich's decaying resources and unsustainable ambitions. 12. The U.S. Army's secret spraying of St. Louis and other cities in the 1950s and 60s with chemicals like zinc-cadmium sulfide is a chilling example of government experimentation on its own population. They claimed they were testing defensive smokescreens against potential Soviet attacks. However, they deliberately targeted low-income, predominantly black neighborhoods without informing residents or obtaining consent, exposing hundreds of thousands to substances later linked to health problems, including cancer. Calling it merely dumb ignores the profound ethical violations and lasting harm caused by this reckless disregard for citizens' well-being disguised as national security research. 13. The Allied Ghost Army was deception elevated to an art form. This top-secret unit, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, used a stunning array of tricks. Hundreds of inflatable rubber tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces, powerful sound systems blasting recordings of troop movements and construction noise for miles. Fake radio networks broadcasting misleading traffic. Even actors dressed as generals making phony inspections. Their elaborate illusions successfully convinced the Germans that major Allied forces were positioned elsewhere, playing a crucial role in the success of D-Day and other campaigns. They literally won battles with hot air and sound effects. 14. Rudolph Hess, Hitler's deputy Führer, undertook one of history's most bizarre solo missions. In May 1941, apparently convinced he could personally negotiate peace, he secretly piloted a Messerschmitt Bf 110 fighter by himself from Germany to Scotland. He parachuted out near the estate of a duke he hoped would facilitate talks, sprained his ankle on landing, and was promptly apprehended by a local farmer armed with nothing but a pitchfork. Hitler furiously denounced him as delusional. The British were utterly bewildered and simply imprisoned him for life. A stunning display of high-level rogue diplomacy ending in utter, embarrassing failure. 15. The British sticky bomb, a desperate measure for infantry to combat tanks. It was essentially a glass flask filled with nitroglycerin, covered in an extremely sticky substance, birdlime, encased in sheet metal, and mounted on a handle. Peel off the tape, slap it onto a panzer. Simple. Except the adhesive was notoriously unreliable on dirty, dusty, or wet tank armor, common conditions, but loved sticking to the soldier's own wool uniform. Imagine the sheer, heart-stopping panic of being physically attached to your own live, high-explosive anti-tank grenade while trying to run away under machine gun fire. Utterly terrifying design flaw. 16. Project Habakkuk wasn't just an ice aircraft carrier. It was envisioned as a 2-million-ton behemoth constructed from Pykrete, a frozen mixture of water and wood pulp stronger than concrete. Proposed by Geoffrey Pike, this floating iceberg fortress was meant to be unsinkable and provide air cover mid-Atlantic. Large prototypes were built, and Pykrete's durability was proven. It resisted bullets. The project ultimately melted away when engineers realized the immense scale and energy required for the refrigeration system needed to keep such a colossal ice structure from thawing in the relatively warm Atlantic would cost more in steel and resources than building several conventional carriers. Thermodynamics put this cool idea on ice permanently. 17. Beyond its horrific human experiments, Japan's infamous Unit 731 explored some truly bizarre biological warfare delivery methods. One particularly outlandish concept involved packing plague-infected fleas into specialized ceramic bombs. These bombs were designed to shatter upon impact, releasing the infected fleas over enemy populations or agricultural areas. Leaving aside the monstrous ethics, the sheer logistical complexity of breeding, infecting, storing, transporting, and effectively deploying millions of tiny, fragile insects via aerial bombardment highlights a level of desperate, almost cartoonishly evil innovation combined with questionable strategic practicality. Weaponized itching on an industrial scale. 18. Benito Mussolini's decision to enter World War II in June 1940 was a spectacular example of opportunistic miscalculation. Convinced that France was already defeated and Britain was on the verge of collapse following the German Blitzkrieg, he declared war hoping to make easy territorial gains and claim a seat at the victor's table. However, the Italian military was woefully unprepared for a major conflict, plagued by outdated equipment, poor training, inefficient logistics, and questionable leadership. This resulted in immediate and embarrassing setbacks in Greece, North Africa, and elsewhere, requiring costly German intervention and ultimately turning Italy from a potential partner into a significant burden for the Axis. 19. Hitler's late-war obsession with futuristic Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons, ultimately proved strategically idiotic. While technologies like the V-2 ballistic missile, the Me-262 jet fighter, and advanced U-boats were groundbreaking, they consumed enormous resources, materials, fuel, skilled labor, research time, that were desperately needed for mass-producing proven, effective weapons like the Panzer IV tank or the STG-44 assault rifle, and for basic supplies. These wonder weapons arrived too late, in too few numbers, and were often mechanically unreliable, having minimal impact on the war's outcome while significantly weakening Germany's overall conventional fighting ability. A triumph of propaganda over practicality. 20. The American OSS, embracing the truly bizarre, developed a stink bomb codenamed Who Me. This wasn't about causing damage, but pure psychological humiliation. Encased in a small pocket atomizer, it contained a chemical compound that produced an incredibly potent and lingering smell strongly resembling human feces. The intended tactic was for agents to covertly spray it on German officers in public places, hoping the resulting extreme social embarrassment and ridicule would shatter their morale and undermine their authority. The sheer pettiness and juvenile nature of this officially sanctioned weapon is truly something to behold. 21. During the height of the Battle of Britain invasion scare in 1940, the British government issued public guidance on dealing with potential German paratroopers. Alongside sensible advice was the astonishingly polite suggestion: treat them firmly but kindly. Offer them tea if you have any. This perfectly encapsulates the famous British stiff upper lip and obsession with propriety, even in the face of armed invasion. The image of confronting heavily armed Fallschirmjäger with a request to pop the kettle on is the pinnacle of surreal, wartime absurdity. One wonders if sugar was also recommended. 22. Operation Bernhard was Nazi Germany's ambitious plan to destabilize the British economy by flooding it with expertly forged currency. Using highly skilled Jewish printers forced into labor in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, they produced millions of pounds sterling in counterfeit banknotes so perfect they could fool even bank tellers. The execution of the forgery was brilliant. The distribution plan? Dumb. They struggled to find a way to introduce the massive volume of fake cash into circulation effectively and subtly enough to cause hyperinflation without immediately being detected. Much of it was never used and ended up dumped in Austrian lakes after the war. 23. Resourceful American GIs discovered an unconventional but highly effective use for standard-issue condoms, protecting their rifle barrels. In the wet, muddy, sandy conditions frequently encountered in combat zones across Europe and the Pacific, stretching a condom over the muzzle of their M1 Garand, M1 carbine, or Thompson's submachine gun provided a cheap, waterproof seal against debris and moisture. This simple field hack prevented dangerous barrel obstructions and ensured weapons functioned reliably when needed most. Practical ingenuity meets slightly awkward battlefield necessity. 24. While the Allies were splitting atoms, key figures in the Nazi regime, notably SS leader Heinrich Himmler, were deeply invested in bizarre occultism and pseudoscience. The SS Ahnenerbe Institute wasted significant resources funding expeditions to Tibet, searching for mythical Aryan ancestors, investigating hollow Earth theories, consulting astrologers, and pursuing fringe ideas like world ice theory. This fascination with mysticism and rejection of established science, stemming from warped ideology, represented a significant and ultimately fruitless diversion of focus and resources from the practical realities of fighting a modern industrial war. 25. The Japanese I-400 class submarines were true marvels of engineering for their time. The largest submarines built until the nuclear era, each capable of carrying and launching 3 Aichi M6A Siren attack floatplanes from a watertight hangar and catapult system. Their intended mission was a surprise attack on the Panama Canal locks. After Japan's surrender, the U.S. Navy captured the surviving I-400s, meticulously studied their advanced capabilities, a genuine underwater aircraft carrier, and then, fearing the technology would fall into Soviet hands as the Cold War brewed, deliberately scuttled them in deep water off Hawaii. A technological treasure destroyed by nascent superpower paranoia. 26. Fanta, the globally recognized orange soda, owes its existence directly to Nazi Germany and World War II trade embargoes. When the war cut off the supply of Coca-Cola syrup to Germany, the head of Coca-Cola Deutschland, Max Keith, needed a new product to keep his bottling plants operational. He improvised, creating a fruit-flavored soda using whatever scarce ingredients were available, often industrial leftovers like whey, a cheese byproduct, and apple pomace, fiber from cider pressing. He named it Fanta, derived from the German word for imagination. The brand thrived in wartime Germany and was later acquired by Coca-Cola globally after the war. 27. Donald Duck became an unlikely weapon in the U.S. Treasury Department's arsenal. The 1943 Disney animated short The Spirit of 43, commissioned by the government, features Donald grappling with his conscience, represented by a thrifty Scot and a wasteful zoot suitor, over whether to spend his paycheck or save it to pay his income taxes. The cartoon explicitly frames paying taxes promptly as a patriotic duty essential for funding the war effort against the Axis powers. Using a perpetually angry, semi-clothed duck to lecture on fiscal responsibility is peak wartime propaganda absurdity. 28. The BBC's broadcasts to occupied Europe were more than just news and music. They were a vital channel for espionage. Hidden within seemingly innocuous, personal messages or musical programs were coded phrases understood only by resistance fighters. A line like, "The owl hoots thrice at midnight," or "Uncle Henry's socks are blue," could signal specific orders for sabotage, timings for supply drops, warnings of German movements, or confirmation of agent arrivals. It turned everyday radio listening into a nail-biting exercise in secret communication, operating right under the enemy's nose. 29. Finland's wartime position was uniquely bizarre. They allied with Nazi Germany, yes, but only as co-belligerents against their common enemy, the Soviet Union, who had attacked Finland previously. Crucially, Finland resisted German pressure and refused to implement widespread anti-Semitic policies or deport the vast majority of its Jewish population, who largely survived the war. They fought alongside the Wehrmacht on the Eastern Front, but maintained political independence and rejected the Nazis' core genocidal ideology, creating one of the strangest and most morally complex alignments of the entire conflict. 30. The famed Maginot Line, France's multi-billion franc chain of fortifications, was a masterpiece of engineering designed to stop a German invasion, based on the last war. Not only did it crucially stop short of the Ardennes forest, wrongly deemed impassable by tanks, but its design heavily prioritized static defense against infantry and artillery. It lacked adequate mobile reserves, sufficient anti-aircraft defenses, and assumed rivers were major obstacles, underestimating German engineering capabilities like pontoon bridges. It was an incredibly expensive, concrete lesson in failing to adapt to modern mechanized warfare. 31. Facing devastating tank losses early in the invasion, the Soviet Red Army sometimes resorted to using tachankas. These were essentially horse-drawn carts or wagons, often simple farm vehicles with a heavy machine gun, typically a Maxim gun, mounted on the back, usually facing rearward to provide covering fire during retreats. A relic from the Russian Civil War, these incredibly vulnerable contraptions were tragically outmatched by German tanks, artillery, and aircraft. It was a desperate, visually striking symbol of early Soviet struggles against the Blitzkrieg, highlighting the initial lack of modern equipment. 32. The Battle of Los Angeles, in February 1942, was a night of pure mass hysteria on the American home front. Triggered by fears of a Japanese air raid shortly after Pearl Harbor, reports of unidentified objects in the sky, likely a weather balloon or flares, caused utter panic. U.S. anti-aircraft batteries surrounding Los Angeles opened fire wildly for several hours, unleashing over 1,400 shells into the darkness. Searchlights scanned frantically. The result? 0 enemy planes shot down, because there were none, but several civilian deaths and property damage caused by falling friendly fire shrapnel. A terrifying, embarrassing overreaction fueled by fear. 33. Both Axis Germany, with broadcasters like Mildred Gillers, aka Axis Sally, and Japan, with several women collectively dubbed Tokyo Rose, employed English-speaking female radio announcers for propaganda aimed at Allied troops. They mixed popular American music with demoralizing content, spreading rumors of infidelity back home, exaggerating Axis victories and Allied losses, reading names of captured soldiers, and urging listeners to surrender. While certainly creepy and designed to undermine morale, most historical accounts suggest the GIs primarily listened for the familiar music and treated the propaganda itself as a joke or minor annoyance, rather than a serious psychological weapon. Okay, can we just acknowledge the sheer volume of idiocy we just witnessed? Weaponized bats burning down their own base? Pigeon-guided missiles? It's a miracle the planet survived. So, spill it. Which one of these 33 facts completely melted your brain? Or maybe you know an even dumber World War II moment we missed. Unleash it in the comments. Let's build the ultimate archive of historical fails. If your faith in strategic thinking is now shattered, smash that like button. And hit the subscribe button because trust me, history's closet is full of skeletons. Very, very dumb skeletons. Stay weird.